Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our graduate programs in the Social Sciences and Humanities webinar. I'm excited that so many of you were able to join us live today. My name is Michaela Thompson. I'm the Graduate Enrollment Management Coordinator for the School of Graduate Studies at the University of Lethbridge. And joining me today is Dr. Carly Adams. She's a professor in the Department of Kinesiology at the University of Lethbridge, and she's also the chair of the Social Sciences and Humanities Program Committee. Joining her today are two of her students, one student from the MA program and one student from the PhD program, to give you a broad perspective on what graduate student life is like at the University of Lethbridge, as well as how to build a strong and successful application and some unique aspects of our social sciences and humanities graduate programs. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Adams.
Thanks, Michaela. Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. This is a unique situation when we're all in our own homes, and I hope everyone is doing well. So today I'm here to speak with you about graduate programs in the social sciences and humanities, and to give you a little bit of insight into our programs at the University of Lethbridge. We know you have some big decisions to make as you figure out what your graduate program will look like. And we hope today we can answer some questions and we can shed some light on what it is we do here at the University of Lethbridge. I've been at the University of Lethbridge for 12 years now, and I've worked quite closely with the School of Graduate Studies for a number of years. And as Michaela said, currently I am the chair of the Social Sciences and Humanities Graduate Programs Committee. So hopefully between the four of us here today, with Mariah and Ibs and Michaela and myself, we're able to answer all of your questions. So to begin, I'd like to start with just a bit of an overview to give you a sense of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to have Mariah and Ibs give us their experiences, talk to us about what it's like to be a graduate student, and to offer any advice that they may have for you. We're going to talk a little bit about the Master of Arts and PhD in Cultural, Social, and Political Thought requirements. We're going to speak a little bit about why you should come to the University of Lethbridge, and we'll talk about how to apply. So to start, we have many majors, as you can see here on my slide, available in the Master of Arts program at the University of Lethbridge. And I just want to highlight a few. I've got a couple of there in yellow, because those are our newest majors that we offer. The newest majors are Cultural Resource Management and the Cultural, Social, and Political Thought major, which we offer at both the MA and the PhD level. We have many majors: agricultural studies, anthropology, geography, history, kinesiology, Indigenous studies. You can see the whole list there. So it's really important to look through and to see what we offer and how it matches up with what you're hoping to do in your graduate program. So as I mentioned, a couple of years ago, we started a new major called Cultural Resource Management. And I just want to talk briefly about this one because it's quite unique. This major is the only CRM program in the province of Alberta. And the major provides students with training in the skills and methods and theoretical background that are necessary for work as a professional archaeologist within the cultural resource management industry in Alberta and, of course, elsewhere and beyond. Graduates of this major will also be prepared to run their own companies and their own projects. So this is quite a new, an exciting major at the University of Lethbridge that if you're interested in archaeology, I suggest that you look into this one in more detail. There's also a required co-op with this one, so you'll be out in the field as well as part of the major. So in terms of our Master of Arts program, the admission requirements, it's a 4-year bachelor's degree with a minimum 3.0 based on a 4.0 scale. on the last 20 university graded courses. This is an important point. It's not on your whole transcript, but on the last 20 university graded courses. And in terms of the application that you're putting together, there's a number of pieces that we require. We require all of your transcripts. So it's important that you gather those together if you've done some education at different schools, that you submit all of those. We require a curriculum vitae, so your CV telling us what it is that you've done, a letter of intent, which we'll talk more about in a minute, and 3 letters of reference, which I'll also speak about in a minute, and of course, the English language proficiency as well. All of this is on our website, and we'd be happy to answer other questions that you might have. So in terms of the actual degree requirements, we have a requirement that you need to take 3 to 6 courses, so a minimum of 9 credits. You'll also be completing a thesis as part of your MA degree, so individualized research that you structure and plan with your supervisor that really allows you to dig into your interest in terms of research, what it is that you want to be studying and researching and becoming an expert on. We also have, as of a few years ago, a cooperative education option. So you can do a co-op as part of your MA degree. And this is really exciting because it gives you an opportunity to get some experience, to get out into the field. And it can be a really exciting part of your master's degree if it's something that you'd like to put in. Just to note, there are some majors on our campus that have required courses, certain majors and concentrations like economics and cultural, social, and political thought and kinesiology have required courses that you need to take. There are other departments as well. So it's important that you look at those and you understand what required courses there are and what you need to take as part of your degree. In terms of the application deadline, we have several deadlines that you can apply. You can apply for February 1st, May 1st, and October 1st. The MA in economics is a fall intake only, so you would apply on February 1st to begin in September. And the MA in the cultural, social, and political thought are only spring and fall intakes. So you couldn't start in the summer, for example. In terms of program duration, a full-time program is 12 to 24 months, and a part-time program is 24 to 48 months. So again, all of this is on the website, but just to give you a sense of our program and what it is that we offer. I want to switch briefly to PhD. And in terms of the PhD, again, it's an admission requirement, the master's degree with a minimum of 3.5 on the last 20 university graded courses. We require very similar documentation very similar to the MA application. So your transcript, your CV, letter of intent, 3 letters of reference, and your ELP. Again, you're required to take a number of courses. You're required to put together a PhD proposal. There's a comprehensive exam, a thesis, and a thesis oral defense. And the program duration for our PhD program in cultural, social, political thought is 48 months. And as I mentioned previously, we have a fall intake and a spring intake. So starting in September or starting in January for that program. So I have some tips for you. I want to talk for the next few minutes about how to craft a really good, strong, quality application. It's really important that you start early. That I have at the top right hand of my screen, think ahead and plan backwards. It's really important that you start early. You make sure that you have enough time to gather all the pieces you need and to develop a really quality application for submission. You want to make sure you know the application deadline for the term that you wish to begin so that you have lots of time to start. And when I say start early, I mean start preparing months before the application deadline. You want to give yourself enough time to write your letter of intent, to have other people look it over. Maybe your potential supervisor is willing to have a look at it and to give you some feedback. You also want to give your referees enough time to be able to write really good, strong letters of reference for you. So when you contact your referees, you want to make sure you're giving them a few weeks. I recommend 3 weeks at least to write those letters of reference so that they have enough time to be able to do it well. It's also really important when you're writing your application that you're clear and you're concise when you're writing your letter of intent and your CV. You want everything to be really well organized and well written. Ensure you have confirmed with your proposed supervisor that they're willing to supervise you. That is a requirement for all of our majors except for economics. Economics is an exception. You can apply to that program without a supervisor. But for all of our other programs, you need to make sure that you have contacted someone and they have agreed to supervise you throughout the duration of your program. This is a really important point, and you cannot apply to the graduate program without this. So start early, having conversations with people. Even if you're in your second or third year of your undergrad, it's never too early to start having conversations with someone that you think you might like to work with and that you think would be a great fit for you and the research that you want to do. So again, I have here apply early. Make sure you're giving your referees enough time to submit their letters. Also, to go back to what I was just saying about contacting a supervisor and making sure that you have someone lined up to supervise your research. Be patient when doing this, especially now with everyone switching to teaching remotely, and certainly depending on the time of year. It may take a while for people to get back to you. So be persistent, but patient and polite, and give people a bit of time to respond. And this is why it's really important to start having those conversations early so that you've got this in place well in advance. And the proposed supervisor is also a great person to help you with your application, to read pieces of it, to give you suggestions and insight into how you might improve it and develop it into a really good quality application. In terms of the letter of intent that I spoke about, this is a really, really important piece of your application. Application reviewers are looking for applicants that clearly understand the research focus of the chosen program. And this is really your opportunity to provide evidence of a strong foundational knowledge in your chosen area. So do make sure to highlight those things. Depending on which area you're going into, if you've taken previous courses, if you've worked as a research assistant with someone in that area, if you've had work experience or volunteer experience in that area, make sure you're highlighting that just to add some depth to why you want to do this research and the foundation that you have. Your letter of intent outline your reasons for wanting to enter a graduate program, what your goals and objectives are for applying. And it should also articulate how your academic or professional background has really prepared you for these proposed studies. So again, your courses, any experiences that you have that lead into that. So what do you want to include in this letter of intent? The letter of intent is not long. It's quite a short document. And you want to think about including things like what you want to study in your proposed program, why you want to pursue this field, and also why the University of Lethbridge and the program you're applying to is a good fit for you. You want to make sure that you're indicating a really strong fit between you and your supervisor and their research expertise. So the letter of intent really is your opportunity to show the admissions committee your passion for doing this research and explain how dedicated and invested you are in the proposed graduate program. Again, be clear. It should be well written. It should be no longer than 1 page in length, usually around 500 words, and be very concise if you can. The application procedures and details for this are, of course, all on our website. In terms of the letters of reference, the requirements for the letters of reference do vary by major. So again, you want to be looking at our website to make sure that you know exactly what you need in advance. They do vary from major to major. So see the application procedure for specific details. For the MA, we do require 3 references. At least 2 of them should be academic, and you must have studied under at least one of your referees. So if you took a course with someone, that might be a great person, or you took several courses with someone, that might be a great person to write you a letter of reference. If you worked with someone as a research assistant, and they got to know you a little bit better through that, you want to choose your referees very carefully, and you want to pick someone who can write a very strong letter of reference for you. Securing a supervisor. So I just want to touch on this for just a minute, because this is a very, very important step in the application process. As I mentioned, all majors except for economics require that you identify a supervisor at the point of application. So you need to have this person in place. And this is a really, really important step. And I've got a picture here of our website, and this is the Future Student website, where you can go onto the database and search faculty. So if you know that you want to come to a specific program, but you're not quite sure who to work with, I do recommend going through this, read through faculty profiles, see what their expertise are, see if there's a good fit with your proposed research, and then send them an email and introduce yourself and explain what it is you want to research. Ask them if they're taking on students and if they would be willing to have a conversation with you. It's really important that you start to develop a relationship with your proposed supervisor. You want to make sure that this is someone that you can work with for 2 years if you're doing an MA, or for 4 years if you're doing a PhD. And you want this to be a really good fit, someone that you've spoken to a lot and they can support your research in the ways that you need. So I'm going to take a break from talking for a few minutes because I have other people here that I'd like to introduce you to. As Michaela mentioned at the beginning, I have 2 students with me today, Mariah and Eves, and I've invited them today to speak with you about their experiences as graduate students and to offer any advice they may have for you. So I'll start with Mariah. Mariah, would you like to spend 2 or 3 minutes sharing your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds great. Thank you. My name's Mariah. I am a second-year student in my MA, and I'm in the Department of Geography and Environment. My research is looking at a program called the Private Sponsorship of Refugees program in Lethbridge. However, despite being in the geography department, my background is actually in education and anthropology. Before doing my MA, I actually worked as a teacher. And one thing that I have found to be really awesome about the U of L is that there's a lot of connections across disciplines, especially in the social sciences and humanities. So even though I'm in the geography department, I also have been able to work with people from a really wide variety of disciplines, which has been excellent. That's something I've really loved about the U of L. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the part of the application process that I found the scariest or the most daunting, which Carly has just talked a little bit about, which is finding a supervisor. And so I asked some of my fellow grad students about their experiences and if they had any advice, and together we came up with some tips. So the first one was that you really want to be able to find a good match, both in terms of their research interests, but also in terms of their personality and your personality, and the way, like the way they work, and how, if you feel like you could have a strong relationship without them throughout their program. So one thing that I found helpful was not only reading their research, but also looking them up like on YouTube to see if they had any talks that you could watch. It just gives you like a little bit more of an impression of what they're about and sort of their style to see if you would make a good match with them. It can also be helpful if you are at a different institution to talk with some of the professors that you have, if you're close to, and see if they know of anybody who would be a good fit. So my friend Sam, for example, was studying archaeology at the U of C, and she talked to one of her professors and was like, hey, this is sort of the research that I'd like to do. I want to go to the U of L. Do you know of anybody who would be a good match for a supervisor? And then that professor was able to sort of match her up and help give some guidance. And lastly, make sure that you meet with the person. even if it's over Zoom, it's just a really good way to like already start building that relationship and start moving forward. And then in terms of once you actually start your program, my biggest piece of advice would be to try and reach out and connect with other students as much as you can and build those networks. I find that sometimes it can be a challenge and you're sort of can be worried what others would think if you try and plan an event or reach out, but people have been so receptive to it. And so it's really great. Yeah, it just helps you to build that network and have that support system. So thank you guys for listening. Hopefully those tips can be a little bit helpful for you, and best of luck with your applications and graduate studies.
Thanks, Mariah. That was really great. I appreciate all of that. And I think the students will find that really helpful as well. As you said, it's really important. I think sometimes it's hard to reach out to potential supervisors, especially if you don't know them, and just start that conversation. But for the most part, people are really receptive. And as you said, you know, as you're reading someone's research, it's always a great idea to just email someone and say, hey, I was reading this article of yours and I found it really interesting, and you know, make a connection in some way to what it is that you want to do just to start that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And show like a shared interest and a passion for similar things helps a lot.
Absolutely. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, next I will ask Eves, who's a PhD student in the Cultural, Social, and Political Thought program, to share with us for a few minutes about his experience.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ibrahim. I go by Eves. I am a student at the PhD program. I'm entering into my second year of the program. But before then, I was a probation officer for 11 years. I worked with young offenders, Edmonton, Calgary, and ended up in community corrections as part of a probation officer, senior probation officer. In 2015, I started teaching at the college. And so, but all along, my interest has always been looking at Black Canadian youth and their relationship with the criminal justice system. And when you think about this, anytime that I thought about my topic of interest, I knew that it wasn't something that's going to be just fit in within a sociology or political science stream and so on. And so when I found this program, Cultural, Social, and Political Thought program, I thought this is one of the best programs so far that I can explore my own topic of interest. So I am working on my interest research program. I'm looking at the relationship between Black youth, the perception of Black youth, of their relationship with the police. And when I started this, you know, this was after the Black Lives Matter movement started, and right towards the end of my first day into the program, we saw the George Floyd's killing, and it shows the importance of my own research interest and why is it important that we should be talking about these things. We should be researching these issues of anti-Black racism, both in Canada and the United States. But, you know, as part of the admission process, one thing that I found was, I thought I didn't like this area, was to find a supervisor prior to admission. At first, when I started the process, it was daunting. I was like, no, why are they doing this? Why, you know, we should have been able to apply and go in and you get assigned a supervisor. But after going through the program, I knew that, okay, now I know why they are, you know, kind of encouraging this type of process for you to have a supervisor that is willing to work with you. For me, the advantage that I have, I live in Lethbridge, so I was able to meet with about 3 or 4 supervisors, and each, when you talk to them, they're going to point you to somebody else based on your research interest that could be a good fit. And, you know, when you meet your supervisor, somebody that you're going to be working with, you will know that this is the person that I am going to be working with. The connections that you would share with that person at that very meeting and so on. And so start early. I started probably about 10 to 11 months prior to the actual deadline for the application process, you know, sending email to potential supervisors and arranging meetings and meeting with those supervisors and exchange ideas and so on. And yeah, so that's what I did. And I was lucky enough to have a supervisor that we have shared interest of what I wanted to do. And so, I've been within the program, been enjoying the program. I think it's a great program for my own research interest and the people that I've been able to connect with. My program it involves sociology, it involves economics, it involves political things and so on. So I thought, the CTSP program is a perfect fit. So make efforts to make arrangements with somebody to find somebody that's going to be a supervisor for you, and try to see how your research interests align with the person's current interest program at the university. Kali mentioned about having a 3.5, but I think if you want to be more competitive and perhaps, for potential scholarships in terms of tuition fee and so on, it's good to have a GPA that is above that, at least 3.6 or something, that that for sure, okay, if you get in, you're likely going to get a scholarship that's going to cover your tuition fee, which is what I got. So, I think, I don't know, but the making arrangements with the supervisor, having somebody that is willing to work with you, I think it's really, it's daunting, but it's really, really rewarding at the end of the day when you are within the program. Yeah, I think I will stop there for now. Maybe if you ask a question, I might be able to answer some of your questions today. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Yves. That's really helpful. One other thing I want to recommend after listening to Mariah and Yves, and I didn't mention this earlier, is I want to speak just a little bit about how important it is to talk to other graduate students in the program. So as you're starting to meet with supervisors to talk to them about their interests, it's really, you could also ask them to arrange a meeting for you with some of their with some of their graduate students that they currently have. So you can ask their graduate students questions about what it's like to be in the program, what it's like to be at the University of Lethbridge, what their relationship is like with their supervisor, what is this person like to work with, and to get a really candid feel for what the university is like. So thank you, Mariah and Yves, for joining us today. I really appreciate you offering your experiences and your perspectives. Before we conclude the presentation part today, I just want to highlight a few other things that we have to offer at the University of Lethbridge. At the university, we have a number of centers and institutes that can also be places that you work with and do research under, and that can help to support your graduate program. So related to the social sciences and humanities, we have the Center for the Study of Scholarly Communication, the Alberta Gambling Research Institute, the Center for Oral History and Tradition, the Institute for Child and Youth Studies, and the Prentice Institute for Global Population and Economy. And if your research lines up with any of those centers and institutes, we encourage you to get in touch with them as well. Many centers and institutes take on graduate students as affiliates. You can be involved in their workshops and other things, speaker series that they offer, for example. I have an incoming graduate student starting in September, and she was offered employment as a teaching assistant, and many of her hours are going to be working with the Center for Oral History and Tradition. So her research is about oral history within the Japanese Canadian community, and she'll have an opportunity to work very closely with the director of the center throughout the duration of her PhD. So that's something else to think about as you're considering the University of Lethbridge. Also, through the School of Graduate Studies and our teaching center, for example, we offer a number of workshops for graduate students on and about teaching, about grading, about leading a discussion in the classroom, how to be a university scholar, how to give and receive feedback, for example, on human subjects, ethics, and many, many things that are going on in the classroom. And so this is a really important thing to look at as well, because at the University of Lethbridge, we offer a very robust professional development opportunity where you can go to seminars and workshops that will help you develop yourself as a graduate student, as a teacher, and as a researcher. So I'm going to leave it there today. We've all been talking for about half an hour, and I want to make sure that we have enough time for questions. So we'll leave it there today. We hope that you got some important information today about developing your application, about coming to the University of Lethbridge. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask them now or to contact us at the School of Graduate Studies by phone or by email. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Adams and Mariah and Eves, for sharing all of your experiences with us and that important information about applying. It's so interesting to hear about the variety of backgrounds and different student experiences that folks have, particularly in our MA and PhD programs. One of the greatest things about the University of Lethbridge, in my opinion, is the liberal education component and how much we value interdisciplinary research and collaborations. So thank you for highlighting that, Mariah and Eves. I just want to mention a note about funding that kind of popped up when Eves was talking in particular. We get questions about funding a lot from prospective graduate students. And so I wanted to mention that we offer a variety of funding opportunities to our graduate students, and those are all available on our website. But one thing to keep in mind is some of our entrance awards do have different GPA requirements, and meeting those GPA requirements doesn't necessarily guarantee those funding opportunities. But if you are looking for funding opportunities, please do visit our website or reach out to our awards advisor. Her contact information is also on our website, and you can look at our different award opportunities and whether or not you would qualify for them. So just wanted to mention that because I know we will probably get questions about that. So if you do have questions right now, please feel free to put them in the Q&A and we will answer them as they come in. The first question is for Dr. Adams. So regarding a supervisor, so we talked about the importance of finding a supervisor before applying and contacting them early. How soon in advance should a potential applicant contact a supervisor, and how many supervisors can they contact at once?
Sorry, I just realized I was muted. Thanks, Michaela. That's a really great question. From my perspective, it's never too early to contact a supervisor, as I think I talked about earlier. Even if you're in your first year, your second year, your third year, and you have a sense of the type of research you think you might like to do, it's never too early to start developing that relationship. If it's someone that you've taken a course with at the institution, or someone that you've read their research, as Mariah mentioned, send an email, start to develop a relationship so that when you go to put together an application and apply to a program, they already know who you are. And that's really important. In terms of the number of supervisors, Eves had mentioned that he contacted 3 or 4. He met with them in person or via Zoom in some way to have a conversation about their research, about research. And I recommend doing that. It's really important that you talk to a few individuals. Some of you may know exactly who you want to work with, and you've admired their research for so long and you know that it's a great fit for you, and that's great. But sometimes it's a matter of talking to a number of people, really having a conversation about what you want to do and how it fits with their research, and making sure. It's also about more than the research as well. This is someone that you're going to work with very closely for a number of years, and you want to make sure that it's a good relationship, that you have similar expectations around what it means to be a graduate student. If you're someone and you know that you're going to want to meet with your supervisor every week and have them be very hands-on, you want to make sure that that's their way of acting as a supervisor as well, right? Because not everyone does that. And it may mean that you have a very open conversation about what you think you want in your graduate program to make sure that it's a really good fit in terms of what they can offer you. And as I said before, it's really important to talk to their current grad students as well. Meet with current grad students, talk to them about the program, about the experience, they'll give you such candid and great advice as you're considering these big, important decisions.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Adams. I do want to say thank you to Mariah. Those were some really interesting and unique, I would say, suggestions that I hadn't heard. And I think that particularly your suggestion of watching maybe some YouTube clips or something about their research, I think that's really helpful. And yeah, very, very unique. So thank you. Okay. So another question for Dr. Adams. In the application, a letter of intent is required as one of the supporting documents. What advice do you have for students to make their letter of intent more strong and connect with a researcher more directly?
Mm-hmm. That's also a great question. This is a really important part of your application. It's short, it's only 1 page, but it usually is one of the first things that the admissions committee will read. And so you want to make sure that it's well written, that there aren't spelling mistakes, that it's edited, and that it includes all the information that it's supposed to. So it's really important to look at our website. Again, there are slightly different requirements for the letter of intent depending on which major you're applying to. So you want to make sure you're including everything in it. I also recommend doing it well in advance. When you're contacting your referees to write letters of reference, I always recommend sending them your letter of intent, sending them your CV and your transcript if you can, so they have a whole picture of who you are as a student. Because even though you may have taken classes with them or worked as a research assistant, they may not have a really full perspective of who you are as a student. So the more you can send them, the better. In terms of writing the letter of intent, doing it early also gives you an opportunity to have other people look at it. And if you have your supervisor lined up, they're the first person I would recommend going to. Ask them if they'd be willing to read it. They've done this before for their graduate students, and they can offer you some really great insight into what you should include and how you should write it. Mm-hmm. Another thing to think about, sorry, I'll just add one other thing here, is if you know other graduate students in the program, you could ask them if they'd be willing to share their letters of intent. That way you have a sample to work from. You have an example where you can say, oh, okay, that's how they framed theirs, and this is what they've included, and they were applying to a similar program as me, perhaps, and it'll give you some sense of how you can develop it. So reaching out and asking people to share their letters of intent, their CVs even, so that you have a model to work from is also a really good idea.
Great, thank you. Really great advice. Okay, a slightly different question. We've talked a little bit about the interdisciplinary nature of both the MA and PhD program. But one of the admission requirements is a baccalaureate degree in the discipline of interest or a closely cognate discipline. We get this question fairly often. How would a student know if their degree or their academic background was in a closely cognate discipline, particularly for an interdisciplinary major?
Okay. Michaela, are you speaking specifically about the cultural, social, political thought major at the master's and PhD?
So all of our programs. So
all the programs.
I can imagine a scenario where a student might be thinking about applying to like the sociology major, perhaps, or even the history major, but may not have an academic background in that particular major.
Okay. So what the admissions committee is looking for is they want to make sure that you have the required foundation to be able to be successful in your graduate program. So for example, if you have a BA in economics, a bachelor's in economics, and you want to go into a history program, you may not have the required background. But there are cases where you may have a minor in history or you've taken other courses in history. So what I usually recommend is that you get in touch with one of the program specialists at the School of Graduate Studies, and they can help you to determine whether you have the required background that you need to apply to a graduate program. This is also an important conversation to have with your supervisor, because you want to make sure that they feel you have the necessary background as well to go into a specific program and to be successful in it. And so starting with your supervisor, having that conversation with them, they can really help you to determine whether you have the necessary background.
Great, thank you. Just before we move on to one of our final questions, I just want to mention one thing about contacting the School of Grad Studies right now, especially during the COVID situation. So we are working remotely, as you can see. We're not in our office. So I would recommend emailing us first if you do have a question. And I'm looking at the slide and realizing that I don't think that is the correct email. So our office email is sgsinquiries@ulef.ca without the period. So if you are sending us an email with an inquiry, that was my mistake. I didn't catch that. Sorry, Carly. But I do recommend sending us an email, particularly right now, just so we can get back to you more quickly in our remote environment. Mm-hmm. Okay, so moving on to program of study. We talked about how some programs have required courses and some of them don't, but there is that 3 to 6 course requirement for the MA program. How do students decide what courses to take throughout their program?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question. So again, for some programs, there are required courses that you'll be required to take, and some programs have many of the courses laid out. The Cultural, Social, Political Thought program, for example, there are a number of courses you need to take and some options as well. So there'll be a number of courses offered and you need to choose some of them. For other programs, there may only be 1 or 2 courses that are required. And the course selection conversation also goes back to your supervisor. So when you see how important this person is in your graduate program, you want to have a conversation with your supervisor about the courses that will be necessary for you to support your research. And so some of them may be required, others will be optional. And you can choose your courses from within your department, but there also might be courses in other departments that would be a good fit for you and for what it is that you're doing. So for example, Mariah's in geography, but she may take a course in oral history, for example, to support the research that she's doing. And so it's really important to have that conversation with your supervisor, have a look at all the courses that are offered within your department, required, and offered in other departments as well. Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we have one more question, and this I'm going to direct to both of our current students. So as students who have maybe attended other institutions or gone through an undergraduate program, what stands out for you the most about the graduate program at the University of Lethbridge in your experience as a grad student? Maybe we'll go to Mariah first. Can I put you on the spot?
Sure, yeah, I'll go first. I think what stands out to me is that there aren't a ton of grad students, so the community feels small and tight-knit. And so I've been able to build really strong relationships with people just because, whether it's going to TA workshops or taking classes, you tend to see the same people quite often. And even just like the area, like most social sciences and humanities people are in U-Haul. And so though we're online right now, it's just like that close community feel that I really appreciated. In my undergraduate, I wasn't super involved in like the social aspect of the university. I was more like working outside of school and doing other activities. And so when I started my program, my like number one goal on the first day was to make a friend. And so like having that social community was really important to me. And because of the size of the U of L, it actually made it quite easy. And the 2 first people that I met on my first day at the graduate orientation who I sat next to are still 2 of my close friends now. So yeah, that's been awesome.
Excellent, thank you. Yves, what about you?
I did my undergrad at U of C and did my MA at the University of Alberta. So I kind of had a broad idea on the experiences that I've had in those 2 previous institutions. Of course, when you're doing an MA, you are within a high number of students in classes, taking classes together. So you don't have that ability to build that one-on-one relationship, except if you're taking, higher level courses than the class size. But what I find out within this program that I'm in is the number of students that are within a course, very small class sizes, more interactions with other students. And when I started some of the courses that I took earlier within the first semester of my program, we have students from all over the world, if you think about it, if you want to put it that way. We have myself, a student from an African background. We have people from the Middle East. We have indigenous peoples within the course. So I was exposed to various level of thinking, people from different part of the world sharing their own experience. And what I find out is that sometimes we think we're so much different, but the more opportunity that we have in sharing experiences, we tend to see that, okay, it's not that much different, the difference that we often perceive that we have. So just that closeness, very close, small class sizes, more opportunities to develop relationship with the people that you work with. In terms of, I think, just in terms of course selections, earlier on, I sat with my supervisor. He knew what I wanted to do. We went through the list of our courses and select those courses together. So, when you have a supervisor, they actually spend the time with you to work with you and do the things that you wanted to do the way you wanted to do that. Yeah, so I think that's, for me, it stands out. Small class sizes, more interactions with the professors. And I love the environment. I love Lethbridge. You can go down for a run at the coulees and, if you're not scared of snakes. Otherwise, you can go down the coulees and so many pathways to bike, and people will actually see you on the streets and say hi to you, which is something that was different even on campus within Calgary and Edmonton and so on. So that's something to think about too. Thanks.
Wonderful, thank you. That all sounded wonderful, except the part about the snake. So I wanna say I've lived here for almost 8 years, and I've never seen or encountered a rattlesnake. So please don't be afraid. But Yves is right. We do have an interesting ecosystem here, and it is a wonderful city. So thank you both of you. Carly, can I direct this question to you as a supervisor? What stands out for you about the graduate program, and even the distinctions between the work you can do with undergrad students and the work you get to do with grad students?
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Mariah. Yeah, that's a great question. And I think I'm going to piggyback on what Mariah and Yves say and talk about the small environment here at the University of Lethbridge. It's really lovely to be able to have those interactions in a way that you couldn't have at a bigger university. So for example, I did my graduate degree in Ontario at Western University, which I loved, and I had a great experience, but I was in a cohort with dozens of graduate students. And so it was a very different experience than I think our students have. I had tons and tons of people doing graduate work during my master's and PhD, and I didn't necessarily feel quite as connected as I think our graduate students sometimes do, being in smaller classes and having a smaller cohort. So that for me really stands out. I really enjoy the opportunity to be able to develop those relationships with my graduate students. And I do recommend, I love when an undergraduate student will come up to me and start to have a conversation about their interests and their research interests, to ask about how they can be involved in my research program if that's something that they're interested in. So I always encourage students to do that, because it creates a much more meaningful interaction as you're starting to search out someone to be your supervisor. So for me, again, as Yves and Mariah said, it really is the environment at the University of Lethbridge. We're a smaller institution. We have small class sizes and small graduate cohorts. And so it's a very different experience than being somewhere with hundreds of people in your graduate program.
Great. Well, thank you to all three of you. I think at this point we can wrap up if nobody else has anything they want to add. Thank you to our audience for sticking around for the full webinar. And if you have any questions at all about anything we talked about, or anything that perhaps we didn't talk about that comes up later for you, please don't hesitate to reach out to our office. Follow any of the links that Dr. Adams included in her presentation to get to our website. There's lots of really helpful information there, and some stuff that we probably weren't able to get to today. But please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have any additional questions. Thank you again to Dr. Adams and to Mariah and Eves. Thank you so much for being here today and sharing your experiences with us. I hope you all stay well and take care and stay healthy during this uncertain time. And I hope that this has helped encourage you to make some decisions about your graduate education. Thank you and take care.